If there's one thing true in Destiny, it's that you can never count out the Juju. Bad Juju's always been one of those exotics that's been really useful and really fun to use, but it hasn't always been in the spotlight. While it didn't get any direct buffs with Edge of Fate, with the new stat system, I wanted to give an old school build a spin to see how it would hold up, and man was I ever impressed. Skull of Dire Ahamkara and Bad Juju is a perfect combination, and it's one of the most classic Nova Bomb builds there's ever been. The two exotics synergize perfectly, with both massively increasing your super generation while Juju slays out, dropping orbs like candy and cranking your damage output. If you haven't used either option before, to give you a quick rundown, Skull of Dire Ahamkara returns super energy on Nova Bomb kills, and it increases your super generation from any weapon kills while Devour is active. Bad Juju ups your super generation as well, with the effect increasing at each stack of its perk String of Curses, which also reloads Juju on kills and boosts its damage for a 100% increase at max stacks of 5. Combined, you can activate Devour to keep you healthy while you shred through enemies with Juju, never needing to reload, doubling your damage, and netting you a Nova Bomb in literal seconds, which, when launched into a crowd, can refresh up to 50% of your super. In missions with high enemy density, this build is extraordinary, giving you the option to either clear entire crowds with ease or throw multiple supers to tear down any larger targets. Above all else though, it's really fun. It's hilarious how fast you can generate a Nova Bomb, and it feels awesome to go through an activity launching dozens of them. It really makes you feel like that powerful space wizard warlocks are meant to be, and it performs surprisingly well. Now, this build is clearly meant for a specific playstyle that more so favors clearing crowds over single target damage, but in doing several -40 GMs solo during my testing, it feels more versatile than you might think. So we'll do some numbers first before I talk about the game plan and what makes it all tick. Using Outbreak with Rewind rounds as a baseline, at 161 weapon stat, which is just what I had for my build, against non-boss combatants, the highest single mag damage I got was 17,299 total for 1,294 DPS. Against Carl, my highest was 10,091 total for 715 DPS. Juju at base against the dummies dealt 2,232 total for 493 DPS, and against Carl it dealt 1,260 total for 278 DPS. Now, I know that sounds really piddly, but String of Curses times 5 is double damage, which you can see here. A precision hit does 121 at base and 242 at max. While obviously this won't really apply to doing single target damage, applying that to the non-boss numbers, since that'll be reflected in combat, max stack DPS would increase to approximately 986, which drastically closes the gap between Juju and Outbreak. Considering the rate at which you can generate Nova Bombs, as well as the incentive to throw them as soon as you get them, I think it's important to consider that as a part of the build's overall DPS output, so let's go over those numbers as well. Outbreak is known for generating supers pretty fast while dealing precision damage, so as best I could to the dummies, it took about 23 seconds of shooting to build a super and 36 seconds against Carl. When killing Acolytes, however, it took 1 minute 17 seconds to build a super without Devour active, and it took about 112 kills. With Devour active, it took 32 seconds and about 45 kills. Juju, on the other hand, built a super in 19 seconds on its own, killing 33 Acolytes, and when Devour was active, it only took 12 seconds and about 22 kills. This means you generate a Nova Bomb from scratch approximately 3 to 4 times faster when killing adds with Juju. Skull will also refresh a maximum of 50% of your super per Nova Bomb, which from my testing is about 8 kills, with 4 being 25%. So while this is all anecdotal evidence, assuming you can get those 8 kills, it would theoretically only take 11 more kills with Juju to generate the remaining 50% of your super, and there could be as little as 10 seconds between each Nova Bomb. Don't believe me? How about now? So unfortunately, numbers do work a little weird in the shooting range, so it's hard to really test how much damage or DPS a Nova Bomb would do to each level of enemy, aside from bosses. Against a boss though, it does about 9,000 damage, so it's safe to assume it's at least that amount or more. I've found some older testing done by players that reflects a 25% decrease for supers against bosses, but since I can't prove that, we'll just say Nova Bomb does 10k to make it easy to divide. So as a theoretical, let's add everything together for an optimal situation based on these shooting range numbers. If you throw a Nova Bomb, the animation takes about 3 seconds and deals 10k damage. Let's say you net those 8 kills for a 50% refresh with it, and we'll say there's 12 enemies to kill with Juju, which each takes 1 second to kill, which allows for some wiggle room, and would complete the proposed DPS cycle in about 15 seconds total. With Juju's max stack DPS of 986, which we'll say is rolling for 12 of those 15 seconds, you get 11,832 total damage per cycle. Adding in the 10,000 from Nova Bomb, you get 21,832 damage total, which over that optimal 15-second cycle nets a DPS of 1,455. Now, I know it's a lot of numbers to throw around and a lot of theorizing, but I think it's a good way to show that Juju is still viable on paper and that it can even compete in certain areas. While I will often say that I'm not a numbers guy in this game, I do like testing things and I think it's important to know the numbers, but what I really want you to take away from this is it's fun and I think you should try it out. So, on to the build. Devour is obviously one of the central pillars to synergize with Skull, but orb generation is also really strong here, with Juju being great for rapid kills to activate a kinetic siphon mod, so I chose to build around those two core aspects. For my subclass, I went with Feed the Void to activate Devour off of super or ability kills, and Chaos Accelerant to increase grenade efficacy. If you're unaware, kills with Devour active also increase grenade regeneration, so after weapons and super, I brought my grenade stat as high as I could, and I consider that the third most important factor. I really like Vortex grenades, but you can use whichever is your preference, including Suppressor if you need it as an overload option. For fragments, I went with Echo of Starvation as an extra way to activate or maintain Devour off of my orbs, and Echo of Persistence to maximize my Devour uptime. Echo of Reprisal is a great option to up super regen an extra bit, though you likely won't be surrounded with Juju out. It'll be helpful for those close quarter situations where you might be using your special weapon instead. Echo of Expulsion was my final pick, just to juice up my grenade and super a little bit more. I swapped back and forth between both Nova Bombs, but I think Vortex is likely the better option here since it's more likely to pull adds into its AoE and help you get more of your super refunded, but Cataclysm works great too. I also usually ran with an Empowering Rift since I was focusing on Devour, and I like the Empowering Rift to up Juju's damage a little bit more and to help with killing larger targets. For armor mods, I didn't use anything too fancy, mainly just 2 super and grenade fonts to help maximize their damage. I went with a full set of TechSec armor to disorient with Juju, which ended up being 4 gunner archetypes with 1 paragon to get my weapons highest, with super second and grenade third. For stats, my weapons ended up at 161, my super was 114, and my grenade was 91, again just so that I can push them into the hundreds with those fonts. I'd also recommend Kinetic Surges to juice up bad Juju some more, with at least 1 time dilation and 1 charged up mod to increase uptime on your fonts. Juju generates a lot of orbs, so this isn't as necessary. I just personally prefer the option to have an extra armor charge and increased uptime. For weapons, use whatever you'd like that fits your champion's stunning needs. I went with Indebted Kindness for Unstop with the option for overloads with Volt Shot, but you could go with a Returned Memory instead since it's in the current loot pool. I was also using a Jolting Feedback Boom Slang as my main overload option. There's nothing really standout in the artifact mod for Void, but I'd recommend Reciprocal Draw if you're using a rocket sidearm, as well as Elemental Coalescence to generate Void Breaches, which you can activate Devour off of through Echo of Starvation, and I'd also recommend Elemental Overdrive if you're using Void weapons. I had a lot of fun dusting off Skull and Juju since they're both from Vanilla D2, and the game's changed so drastically since they were introduced, it was really interesting to take a trip back in time to experience what's rapidly become an old school approach to Destiny. Abilities are king right now, and with Prismatic, half the match-made activities I'm in, I literally can't see what's going on because of all the abilities flying around and the cacophony of particle effects and explosions. I really appreciated this build because it's a lot slower paced, and sometimes I really like the option to just slow down and use a simple build. You shoot bad Juju, it works real good, and you get a lot of supers. Done deal, easy peasy, and I don't have to practically put a hole in my keyboard trying to smash out as many grenades or consecration slams as I physically can. I personally really try to not fixate on a build being the best of the best. I don't think it's really a competition since I'm always more interested in variety and experimentation over efficiency and power. Do I think it's the most potent build around? No, not at all, but I can tell you it's extremely fun to play with. Everyone loves supers, it just feels so good to use them, and of course that's by design. It's our ultimate tool for a reason. So if you're a player that prefers lower stakes content, or maybe you're like myself and you're alright with trying builds that are a little lower in power or a little slower to play, I think you'll be really pleased if you give this build a spin. I'm admittedly pretty nostalgic for Bad Juju since it was actually my first ever exotic way back in Destiny 1 when they used to come from exotic bounties, and the fact that over a decade later it still slays out as hard as it does is pretty insane. Destiny's been through a lot of changes, but Juju still stands to me as the perfect representation of Destiny's most fun aspects, which is the combination of incredible gunplay synergized with a suite of really fun abilities. To me, nothing does it quite like Juju, and there's really only one thing left to say.